Hey Lloyd, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
I can, and you're right on time. Organized all these years later, huh? I mean, you're the
Well,
on time guy.
well, if you want to quote Ray Liotta in Goodfellas, if you're not organized, you know what happens. You go to jail. Anyway,
Exactly. And from the reading and research I've done, you're probably 1 or 2 degrees away from Henry Hill based on
oh, growing up in Queens, I suppose. Yes. Mhm.
exactly. Well, before I ask about other stuff and how you got to where you are, the 11th Hour, first solo album, I believe, came out
Yes,
right before COVID-19. But how
that's
long
correct.
was it in the works for?
8 years.
8 years.
8 years. Yes. Basically, I took my time with it. Well, I wrote about 16, 17 pieces of music.
Hmm.
And of course, it's all self-financed. So that's kind of what it also took a little bit of time because I wanted to hire some great players to be on it. And I'm a big fan of having great drummers on everything that I do. And I was fortunate enough to get Simon Phillips to play on 2 tracks, Marco Miniman on 3, and Nick DiVirgilio on 4 other ones. And plus the album greatly features this young guitarist singer named Randy McStein, who actually just put out a couple of CDs with Marco, just the two of them.
Hmm.
During the course of the pandemic. They put out two full albums. So basically, it was, it was just, I just wanted to really be sure about everything that I was doing, and I really took my time with it. And obviously, it took 8 years, but there was, then once you get to a certain point, then you got to, having somebody mix it for me, and then whenever I started a piece of the endeavor, it became a 4-week process. So it was like, oh, all of a sudden the months were adding up and the years, and there you have it. But so that's the evolution of that piece of work. And
Sure.
mhm.
As a person who always reads the liner notes, I know Simon Phillips, The Who, Judas Priest, Toto, the guy can
Yeah,
obviously play anything on the
yes,
planet. But did you know him from hiring him for jingles in the past?
no, I knew none of these players. I knew Nick because Nick, back, what year? I guess it was 2016. Nick, myself, Randy, and the guitarist named Don Carr. Nick and Don both work at Sweetwater. Nick had worked with this the singer songwriter producer named Kevin Gilbert.
Mm-hmm.
And Kevin Gilbert had a couple of bands. One was called Giraffe, and the other one was called Toy Matinee. And Kevin had written this. Had written this sort of rock opera
Mm-hmm.
about the music business. That was called, oh gee, the God, I forgot the title of it. That's terrible. But in any case, it was this whole long sort of group of 15 songs, and to celebrate what would have been his 50th birthday at that point, we went and played The Shaming of the True is what it's called.
Yeah, I get it.
And we went to play at Joe's Pub, and
Oh yeah.
we had all these Broadway actors. They were kind of like, it was financed somehow. I don't know who actually did that part of it. And we played at Joe's Pub, and there were some Broadway actors. God, I'm going to forget their names too. With their 3 names, with the middle name.
Right, because somebody had the name before that in the union.
Right, it's the Actors Equity Screen Actors Guild. You got to have a different name. That's why Tommy Lee Jones was Tommy Lee Jones instead of Tom Jones.
Right.
So we did that. I knew Nick from that gig, which was a particularly difficult gig for me, in the sense that when you're the keyboard player in a band, you tend to end up being the complete orchestrator for the whole
director.
thing. Well, I wasn't actually, Nick was the director, because Nick had actually worked with him. But let me just shut that off. Okay, that's a little bit better. I have this giant flat screen that serves as my computer monitor. And all the colors and the sounds are you. And the array of sounds that Kevin used varied, but it was all within a certain realm of piano, organ, and mellotron, and some synthesizer. But I had to basically do a lot of programming, and I spent about 3 weeks before the gig, not only learning the music, which was pretty intense, but doing a lot of programming and choreography. In other words, and I do remember recently seeing Keith Emerson being interviewed about how he has to choreograph everything between his keyboards. But this particular case, I'm using one keyboard, the Kronos, and they have a thing in it called the set list, and you basically line up what patches you want to use in the order you use them. So for the whole set, so you could literally have like 64 to 70 patches all set up, and you just forward them with a foot switch. So it's a lot of timing and a lot of playing, but it was a great gig, and it sounded great, and it came out great. So that's where I knew Nick from. I didn't know Simon personally, but apparently you just go online, do some research, and you find them, and you hire them. And the thing with Simon was, back, I don't know how many years back it was, 4 or 5 years ago, unfortunately, his home was caught in one of those fires in California, and he lost his house. And so he was without a place to record. And so he went into this local studio where he lives in California, and he sent me 26 tracks of drums that just was like, I didn't have to do anything to them. I mean, we eventually did when we mixed, we tweaked them. But man, I just put them up, and it was like, oh, my God, it's there. It's all there. And naturally, these guys do everything kind of in one take, maybe two,
He's that good.
Yeah. And he was the last drummer I put on. Marco was a year before that, and the year before that was Nick. So there was a combination of just really wanting to be sure, because it got a little expensive, and I just wanted to be sure and about what I was giving them to play over. And so that's how that worked out. But it was overall a great experience. Now the trick is to what am I going to do next?
Right.
So,
well,
I was thinking of actually rebelling against all the progressive music and just writing everything in 4/4, but I don't know if I can do that.
If you could write jingles, I think you could write 4/4.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's all I did with jingles. I mean, every once in a while you do hear something in 7 on a commercial. It's usually a pharmaceutical, and it's like this very sort of like poetic piano piece. It's like in 7. And so, but no, yes, it's 4.
Well, I do have other stuff to ask about all that, but delving into the commercial work and all that, the way that I found out about you, and I started Googling after realizing that I knew all your work, was the Nestle Sweet Dreams commercial.
Yes.
I love the band Faith No More. Faith No More covered that song live on and off for 8 years.
That's
and I was asking Bill from the band, the bass player, like, hey, did you ever speak with Lloyd over the years? He goes, no, we never heard from him. I was curious if you were familiar with Faith No More covering Sweet Dreams.
Yes, I was. And the one video I found of it, it was first of all, flattering. But I thought it was good and everything, but it just seemed a little out of character to have a commercial in the middle of this sort of like hardcore, metal rap band, like sort of one of the originators of that. But no, I thought it was cool. I thought it was really cool. That piece, it's interesting because there's a little bit of a backstory to that, in that they originally wanted to license the Eurythmics track, Sweet Dream.
Made of this, yes.
And then in those days, artists wouldn't do that. Artists just didn't. It was like, that was a big no if you did that. And thankfully for people like me, because it kept my industry alive until that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And so whatever we did couldn't sound like that, and they just couldn't find anything that would do it. And at the time, I had just discovered this singer-songwriter pop star in England named Nick Kershaw.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, that's on the Donnie Darko soundtrack. I forget what it's called. He had a big too. Yeah.
And I became a big fan of his. Like, I have all his records still to this day. I listen to him, and I just think he's a tremendous musician, great songwriter, and excellent guitar player. And I even got to see him the one live appearance in New York that I think he had back in 1985. So I was listening to a lot of that, and that, a lot of his melodies and concepts were like, drifting around in the back of my head. And I just, like all the jingles, most of the ones that I won, I'd write them like in 30 seconds. Everything would just sort of click at the moment, and I would just get out, it was like very spontaneous thought. I would just get out of the car and I'd sing it and go, that's it. And then I played it for them. I made a little 4-track demo because that's all I had in those days, a little Porta Studio, which I actually still have, but I doubt it works. And I played it for the creative over the phone with the producer from the jingle company I was working at. And he goes, that's it. That's it. You've got it. You got it. So, and he also wanted me to sing on it too. So I actually did the vocal on it. So it was sort of Nick Kershaw inspired commercial. And like I like to say, it was one of the first commercials in a minor key, first jingles in a minor key.
It is a minor key, sure.
Yeah. And my a friend of mine who was on the other side, was on the advertising side. Yeah, and it's the last, but which I thought was funny because it's kind of true. But yeah, it was in a minor key. But that was the fact that Faith No More did that was very cool. I thought it was very cool.
My friend, who's a huge fan of the commercial and himself writes music for commercials after having done the major label thing on and on, he was thinking that song was meant to be a These Dreams by Heart copy, like just different enough. But the fact that you mentioned Sweet Dreams and the Eurythmics, that actually clears up a big thing right there.
Well, lyrically, I think that's where the copywriters and the account people got it from. They got it from, because it was a brand new piece of chocolate they were coming out. It was white chocolate.
Yeah.
Which is now gone from the market after the 5 years that jingle ran. It's like, I don't, it's gone. It's just gone.
It's gone, except in our minds and our memories. And
that's correct. Oh, I've had, I was at the NAMM show earlier back in January before the pandemic hit, although who knows by then, 40,000 people wearing black in the Anaheim Convention Center. Yeah. And Tom Brislin, who's an acquaintance of mine who plays keyboards in Kansas now, came up to me and complimented, I always love that commercial, so it's hard for me to really come out of my bubble and see that people actually, have connected with me with my work somehow. Because to me, it became a business. I was my nose was to the grindstone. I was working my ass off, and I did it. I had like a 25, about 20 to 25 years straight intensity. And then I kind of coasted for the last, 8 or 10 years. And so I'm kind of like in semi-retirement now. I do very little commercial work, which is, I'm very happy about. But, every once in a while I'll get something. And I think I have a couple of things on the air right now, but nothing really to write home about,
But the way that so many of these campaigns actually reached, like Every Kiss Begins with K,
right?
Which my friend Lucy Woodward, who I think sang.
Oh, I know her very well. Yes.
Yeah. That and Subway Eat Fresh and the CBS College Football theme. These things have such longer lives than traditional hit songs, to the point that it's like, well, Lloyd has written dozens of hit songs. That's how
it kind of blows my mind that, the Kay Jewelers thing, it's 20 years ago. I wrote that. Okay. I mean, Subway lasted about 3 or 4 years, but it's memorable. But the football theme, I mean, I re-recorded it with Simon playing drums. And that was written for Super Bowl 21. Okay. So and then they decided to use it for the NCAA college football starting that same year in 1987, which then flipped over to SEC. So that's been running. This is the 34th season it's run. And that's like half a lifetime ago for me, but that to me, that when I wrote it, again, I wrote that in however long it took me to record it. I had a Kai 12-track recorder in those days. It was like 1986 or so. In my Prophet 5, and I had one of the early Kai samplers, and and I just put together this track with the Lindrum, with the toms, the Simmons toms, and they pretty much flew up my demo and added horns to it.
Wow.
And, yeah.
It's good to hear that so many things that you wrote weren't the product of do it again, do it again, do it again. This time, do it in this time signature. It seems like you had, hard work aside, a lot of luck with the first pass, or the first pass with a few mix tweaks being what we heard.
On those particular jobs, yes.
Okay, so I focused on the good luck ones.
I cannot begin to tell you the nightmares of some of the other jobs. One in particular was I wrote for Budweiser. I had very good luck with Budweiser. I had like an 8-year run with them from like 1985 to 94. Maybe that's like 9 years, 10 years. And the last thing I wrote for them was a thing called Proud to Be Your Bud. And it ran for like a year or two. And it was a whole bunch of spots. But that one, August Bush the third, the older guy, the older August, loved that track. Then they went out and did a whole completely new exploratory. So here I am I literally did about 20 or 30 demos in all these different genres. And I'm like recompeting again. And I'm thinking, I won this. Why am I doing this again? But I did everything like, classical, funk, all various genres, heavy metal, and they had a meeting and to present all the new pieces of music. And August Bush said, what happened to the thing I liked the last time? Let's go with that. So, and then it ended up with pretty much that track. So it kind of went through this whole thing where they just felt maybe it was they were billing a lot of money for that, because for each one of those demos like $1,500, so it's like you hit it all up. But they're not afraid. They weren't afraid to spend money in those days. So
still not. But for you to get to this place, the research I've done shows that Haystacks Balboa had a deal, toured with big bands, which ties in with that was a wonderful tribute that you wrote to Leslie West on Facebook yesterday. And Leslie's brother was in Haystacks Balboa with you, which shows the small world, Forest Hills music, how many great people came out of there. But what exactly was the point from being, I am an original musician who has a deal, who tours, to now I'm in the studio and just writing and I'm faceless in a way? Was there like one particular gig and then that led to everything?
The worst thing that could happen to somebody who's trying to become successful, in my opinion, is that you get to a point where you're like, it's too soon. It happens too soon and the timing is way off.
Sure.
Because I go from being in a dressing room with a 25-year-old Rod Stewart to a year or two later playing in a Matching Shirts band in some lounge on Long Island 5 nights a week doing The Love I Lost by.
Wait, where on Long Island? I need to know that.
All over. I mean, mostly Suffolk County. A few in Nassau, but mostly Suffolk County, like a club called Pudgy's in Farmingville, a place called Brothers 2. I think it was in Comac. I was, we ended up living on the island. I think we were on the island by then. I can't recall. No, that was before. Just playing all these, these lounges and just going from like one extreme to the other. And kind of like when you have that experience at 18 years old, which is what I was, nothing matches up to it. It's almost like, here's your shot of heroin. Now try to get back to that feeling, and you never quite do. But, I didn't make any money from any of that. So, when it became the faceless part didn't bother me, and the money was that good that, that pretty much changed my life and basically put me in a fairly secure place, although you never know. But there was a lot of stress and excitement with that too. I mean, I worked with some great players throughout the years, and I don't feel necessarily responsible for this, but I kind of like put a plug in for Anton Fig when he got the gig with Letterman back in '85, because Anton was my first cold drummer. And this other bass player, I worked with Will Lee. I worked with
okay.
Steve. One of my first bud spots, which got me tight with the young copywriter producer, was this thing for the boat, and it was the "You Make America Work" jingle back in the '80s. You make America work, and this but's for you. And the third spot I did for them was the band was Anton, Marcus Miller, and Steve Kahn, and me. Steve Kahn's a guitarist. And I wrote this chart out. It was like a fusion chart, with all this, all this like stuff all over the place, and so it was a thrill. I got away with murder with that one. You know what I mean? It's like, because jingles in those days were "Please buy our product," and this was like a real fusion-y, jazz fusion, electric kind of track. So, and it was at Power Station. It was the other thing. I got to work in great studios. Yeah, and we worked in Power Station a lot. And so, I work with a lot of artists. I work with Carl Perkins.
Springsteen's on your credits, and Edgar Winter, and
Edgar. Edgar, I toured. The Springsteen credit is more that I worked with. I toured with Clarence Clemens.
Oh,
I was a Red Bank rocker for about a year, and Bruce sat in with us a bunch of times, and it's so interesting coming from the perspective, because I wasn't a tremendous fan of that music, because I come more from the world of like English rock, because starting with the Beatles, everything from England seemed to appeal to me more, that interpretation, just of the music, but forget what happens when he hits the stage, man. It's like the crowd goes berserk.
That's the case with some artists. Some artists, the studio version is just practically a demo, and then it's the live thing that keeps evolving. And then there's other artists who just stink live, and it's all about the studio version.
Right. Well, certainly now there's a lot of that, only because of, with the technology, you can really fine tune a vocal, and you can make it perfect. Yeah. You just move everything around in the computer, but I was very lucky. I'm very fortunate. I feel very blessed, and I have an incredible amount of gratitude for the experiences that I've had, and when I think about it, I've met a lot of people, and I've worked with a lot of people. So it's, I got about 2,000 or 3,000 people that I got to work with, and worked in a lot of great studios, and not only in New York, but in California. And so, and I think there's some kind of mystique about, and romanticism about, playing live. And I think when the actual part of it, if I were to do that now, which I kind of would love to do with the new record, but obviously the pandemic put a hold on that.
Yeah.
Is that you wonder what you wish for. About sitting in a car for like 18 hours and then playing, and
carrying all the stuff up and down, and waiting around the sound check, and waiting to go on stage.
Yeah. Well, the road is pretty much, 23 hours of work for 1 hour of joy, so that's kind of always been the case. But I guess I was sort of, I don't know if I could say fortunate or unfortunate, that I really didn't spend much more than 5 to 7 months of my life on the road, as compared to a lot of guys who did it full time.
Yeah.
And, I got married young too. I mean, so there was that aspect of it as well. But, I was just lucky enough not to have to travel a ton, so.
Well, going back to what you were saying with Willie and Anton Fig, as again a lighter notes kind of junkie from the classic albums, I know like that's the rhythm section of Letterman's band for decades. So I'm assuming that you were in similar circles with Paul Shaffer and Hiram Bullock and all those people.
Never met Hiram, but Paul came and played on a couple of dates. I had him because I was big on. I'm a Hammond guy. I'm a Hammond B3. Like I had a C3. I had two C3s. Wow. Right now over there, sitting on the corner, is an A100. You know, that my friend Frank Averso, who produced the Spin Doctors, he lives nearby here in the Berkshires, and it was just sitting in his barn. He has a beautiful studio he built. Who else did you say?
I said Hiram and Shaffer, but basically
Shaffer. So Paul comes in and there's a B3 set up. He goes right to the organ. I go, I'm playing organ. Can you play the piano? So he went and played the piano. He was fine with that, you know. But he's a sweet guy. And I think I even had another situation similar. Exact same thing happened. I hired Leon Pendarvis to play piano on something.
Oh, yeah.
And he came and went over to the organ.
He's still with the SNL band, right? All these years later?
Yes. And I'm friends with Sean Pelton. I mean, you know, I kind of know them, you know, but I'm more on the acquaintance side because, you know, I mean, look, Sean and I, we can sit down and have a great time and all that other stuff, but it's not like we see each other as much as we used to, you know. I mean, that's the one thing about technology that's kind of hurt everybody is there's very little human interaction. And I think most people will say that it's just so much more costly now to get human beings in the same room, you know, and so much easier to just have them do it and, you know, send it to you over the internet. So that whole, I would love to be able to, because I have enough space here now. I just built this room. I have enough space here to kind of put a little combo in here, you know, and just, so I would love to try to, that would be a unique experience because my last live date was about 3 years ago. So it was the first one in about 10. You know,
I'm finding there's a lot of A-list players who are doing the mailing in the internet tracks kind of approach. Like Kenny Aronoff is killing. You know, if you, hey, Kenny, I need this. You need it in an hour. You want 8 versions of it? Here you go.
Right.
Some people excel at that, and then other people are just phobic and go, oh, I miss the olden days of sessions and the 12 of us taking a break and having lunch.
Right. That's it. It was, I mean, it was just a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff. And there were many studios, you know, and now we're, you know, I know in Manhattan, there's very few left, although there are new ones popping up, but they're not like the same. You know, there's very little right track power station. It was a place called Clinton.
Is that in Brooklyn?
All right. Well, the Clinton was in Hell's Kitchen at 46th and 10th.
Ah, that makes sense because that neighborhood.
It was a standalone building. This guy Ed Rack and his wife Casey Sizik, who was like the #1 jingle single from the 70s and 80s, bought the building, and they put 2 studios in, all Neve and Studer. But they were a little bit more industrial. They weren't. I didn't look at those as rock rooms. You know, they were kind of clean jingle rooms. You know, that came out of that whole jingle era where you did strings. They had a big room upstairs, like you could do an orchestra. I remember doing a date there as a player with Anthony Jackson and Don. He passed away. Piano player who was in. He was in. Man, my mind's really.
There's a lot of names because, as you said, there was thousands of people that ultimately were on your sessions or things. I don't fault you for losing a few names here.
Yeah, he passed away prematurely, like Richard T. And he was in the Brecker Brothers band, and he was also.
Yeah. Okay, I know Randy Brecker and all that.
Yeah. So, and you know, Randy played on a date for me, and Michael played on a date for me. You know.
Wow.
And, you know, so yeah, I mean, these guys, you know, they were there. You know, if you could get them, you know, Michael Brecker was like, call me anytime. You know, all right, let's get Michael Brecker. Oh, he's booked. So it was like, you know, I mean, I'll call you anytime. It doesn't mean you're going to be available. But I think one of the highlights was actually once I was working at this, for 6 years, I worked at this production company called Crushing Music. That was owned by Joey Levine, who wrote a lot of the bubblegum hits from the 60s, like Yummy Yummy and Chewy Chewy and Gimme Good Lovin' and, Life is a Rock. And for some reason, Mike Smith from the Dave Clark Five showed up. And that to me was a thrill. I mean, here's a guy who had 200 Vox Continentals in his arsenal at one point. And also Lulu came up. I don't know if you know who Lulu is. Lulu was a
UK singer, but big in the UK, not here.
Right. Well, she did have a hit with True Sir with Love.
But she's like Cliff Richard or the Status Quo.
Yes,
where it's exactly. Top 5 artists ever in the UK, and then here it's like I think they had 1 or 2 singles.
That's exactly right. But she at 17 she had her own TV show.
Yes,
and you could find the video of what Hendrix was on, and he kind of he broke the rules in the middle of the song, and they were live on the BBC. In the middle of the song, he stopped and started playing "Sunshine of Your Love" and played over the end credits. They were pulling their hair out. Stop! I think he got banned after that. He cares.
Yeah.
So, I think about it when I was writing that little thing about Leslie, I was just thinking about how young I was. And when I met all these people early on and how passionate about music I was when I was a kid.
Right.
And how I was kind of too, I don't know. I mean, I know I wasn't, but in retrospect, it's I was kind of too young to be there. 15 and 16 and, being underage. And I did a lot of underage gigging but it all makes sense. I mean, now it does, but, but I was just thinking back, it's just gee, I probably should have been home.
The bar for Hanson and Justin Bieber. That's how I'm going to look at it. They were able to have careers because you did it first.
Justin and Alex Bieber and me were like this. Yeah.
Exactly. So I guess my closer, because we've covered so much ground between your album and how you got your start and all these great people you run into, my closer. And I say this because I look at you as a huge success because you've earned a living creating music that people remember. And decades of that. My closers, any last words for the kids?
The business has changed so dramatically. Income streams are way down right now. And certainly with the pandemic, there's no live performance, which was where the bulk of the income was. But you know what? If you love it, just don't stop. I think the thing I always said, the one thing I noticed, and of course I've stopped saying this because I don't want to jinx myself, is that I was always kind of the last man standing. In other words, all my friends from high school kind of, that were in bands with, and all the people I would work with all over through the years, they kind of peeled off, and had to basically go into regular work, if you want to call it
on music.
So my feeling was just don't stop. Just keep going. Just don't stop doing it. Because that's, once you stop, it's the kiss of death. And I had times when I had to go drive a cab in Manhattan in the 70s, but I just, I just knew I had to do this. There was no other way out, and no way out. But you mentioned are you from Long Island?
I'm from Long Island, moved back, and I live in Long Beach, which I'm sure there's 2 degrees away from everything because Carmine Appice used to live here, and Leslie West played here as Circuit of Migrants.
Action House, yeah, I know.
Exactly, the Action House.
My old accountant lives there now. I think one of the buildings on the boardwalk. Reason being, I mean, I'm not sure how old you are, but I have a hunch. I'm not even sure you were born yet. But in the late '70s, I played with a Long Island band that's still together now called the Stanton Anderson Band.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
I did about 14 months with them, and it wasn't a prison sentence. It was actually one of the best bands I was ever in the bar scene. And what could be better than having a crew move your Hammond organ and all your keyboards? So that was a great plus. But so as far as young people are concerned, just keep pursuing it. Do your homework. Research is the key. I'm working with a 15-year-old now who never heard of the police. So it's which I understand. You know, I mean, that band was out 40 years ago. It's like, you know, somebody's going to ask me if I know, you know, Bix Batterley and the, you know, and the Jumpin' Jivers from the 1930s, you know, so
Right.
I mean, I totally get that. But this fella, Randy McStein, who played on my record,
Right.
he really knows his shit. He's got like hundreds of records and listens to music all the time. He's constantly listening to music. Rarity though, because I think kids, I don't know what their attention span is like, but you know, there's still talented people out there, and you know, I just want to hope, you know, wish them all success. You just got to keep going, you know. So
I can't top that. Well, I'll get this posted within the next few days, let you know when it's out there. But thank you so much for your time, Lloyd. Great to connect.
Same here, Darren, and thank you for thinking of me. It's really very flattering. I really appreciate it, and continued success with everything you're doing.
Well, thank you. And my wife just whispered behind me, she can't stop singing the Nestle's Sweet Dreams. Maybe it happens when there's inebriation with us and our friends, but
unless you're ODing on white chocolate, you know.
She does come from the chocolate industry, so
right.
There you go. So we are Lloyd fans in this household. And
thank you
you
so
up,
much.
Man.
You too. All right, buddy.
Thanks. Have a great day.
You too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Paltrocast.